there is a major security operation underway in Argentina. This is the biggest global event this country has ever hosted, and they've really worked to prepare fully for this. Let's not forget as well, last year in Hamburg in Germany there were incidents as well at the G20 summit there. So this is something that accompanies the G20 summit. There are protests. There are protests against the organisation in itself and against nations involved as well. Also, we must factor in the economic situation in Argentina, where we're looking at the year ending with around about 45% inflation. So things difficult here for many Argentines. Many people arguing whether the country should be hosting the G20 in the first place. So a lot of tension, but certainly Argentina has prepared for this. Well over 20,000 security officers will be in place, and the city really very much is on shutdown. The security minister, Patricia Bullrich, said that she recommended residents in Argentina, in fact in Buenos Aires I should say, that they leave the city, because really Buenos Aires will be shut down for the G20 summit in the next 2 days.
OK, thank you very much for that update. That was Joel Richards there, live from Buenos Aires, following the G20 summit. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce has weighed in on the upcoming G20 summit, particularly a meeting scheduled between President Xi and President Trump. A ministry spokesperson said Beijing is willing to work with other countries to strengthen future cooperation in trade and investment, and to keep markets open and to explore new areas for economic growth. The ministry said China will continue to implement its 2030 agenda for sustainable development, support a multilateral trading system, and maintain global free trade. President Xi will meet his American counterpart during the two-day summit. They're expected to discuss the latest in the China-US trade spat.
The two leaders agreed in their phone call that they will try to reach a proposal on the trade dispute that both sides can accept. The two teams have been communicating to implement the leaders' consensus. We hope the U.S. can follow the same direction as China to facilitate an active result for this meeting.
Well, in the latest developments, US President Donald Trump has cancelled a planned meeting with Russian leader Vladimir Putin. In a tweet from Air Force One en route to the summit in Buenos Aires, Trump blamed the cancellation on Russia's seizure of Ukrainian ships and sailors over the weekend. The two leaders had been expected to meet on the sidelines of the G20 summit. Well, as you've already heard, Argentina will host the G20 Leaders Summit in Buenos Aires this weekend. The host is hoping the summit will serve as a turning point for economic recovery. CGTN's Joel Richards takes a closer look.
Roger Rojas has been working for a food delivery app since arriving in Argentina from Venezuela earlier this year. He was able to start work immediately, but there is a downside to joining the so-called gig economy.
Sometimes you can be waiting for 4 hours for one job, which pays less than $2. You have to be available all day and out on the street.
Workers in this growing temporary work industry in Argentina have now put their collective foot down. They formed a new trade union to argue for better conditions. This is just one group of workers who have protested labour conditions and the economic situation in Argentina.
Economic activity is down, unemployment is up, and inflation is hovering at around about 45% as we near the end of what has been a very difficult year for Argentina. The country has had to go to the International Monetary Fund for a $56 billion bailout. But the government does see the G20 as an opportunity.
Argentina had hoped to show a very different image to the world as it hosts the first G20 summit to be held in South America.
It's very important. And also it's an opportunity for the government in a moment in which the economic conditions in Argentina are quite severe.
Many analysts see this G20 as a chance for Argentina to change the narrative.
So Macri popularity has been damaged during this year, and G20 is an opportunity for the government and for the president to shift the agenda, to start talking about other priorities of his policies, not only the economy, and that start showing that Argentina re-engagement in the world can pay off and can bring opportunities for Argentina society.
The formal agenda for the G20 summit is expected to focus on issues from development and food security to the future of work. But as host, Argentina offers a clear snapshot of the complex problems facing many economies around the world. Joel Richards, CGTN, Buenos Aires.
To other news now, Nigeria is gearing up for a presidential election early next year. Incumbent President Muhammadu Buhari is seeking a second term, but he's facing some stiff competition by rivals with a strong support base in the country's southeastern region.
The presidential poll in Nigeria is likely to be a very heated one, and the incumbent president, Muhammadu Buhari, will be seeking a second term. His administration faces criticism over their handling of the Boko Haram insurgency and a perceived non-performing economy.
In Nigeria, and everybody is crying. I am crying too because everything is very, very costly, and there is no money. The money is not circulating.
Buhari enjoys strong support in the country's northern region, but in the southeastern part, he's facing stiff competition from opposition candidate Atiku Abubakar. Traditional Igbo leaders have thrown their weight behind Peter Obi, Atiku's pick for running mate.
We are going to bet it on a political party that has our son, our brother, our friend to be his running mate in the person of His Excellency, Mr. Peter Obi. If we take the position of vice presidency, I think the narratives around this area will definitely change for the better.
President Buhari's party is banking on development projects in the region to help him seal a re-election.
The critical infrastructure that has been put in place by Buhari administration in these 3 years surpasses what PDP has been doing for the past 16 years. You see, our infrastructure in the southeast here was in total state of shambles. But now, not only that it has been repaired.
Observers say in order for the opposition to win, they will have to overcome voter apathy in the southeast region. The presidential election is set to take place on February 16, 2019. Astatal, CGTN.
Meanwhile, President Muhammadu Buhari has visited the key northeastern city of Maiduguri in the wake of a recent setback in the fight against militants. He's urged troops to show more commitment in the fight against Boko Haram. The visit came a day before Buhari headed to the Chadian capital, N'Djamena, for talks with his regional counterparts on how to curb the insurgency in the Lake Chad Basin. The security conference has honoured the roughly 100 soldiers killed recently in an attack on a military base. Buhari has paid tribute to the fallen troops and has pledged to work with his partners in the multinational joint task force to end the conflict. The force comprises soldiers from Nigeria, Cameroon, Chad, Niger and Benin.
The bottom line is to have personal security. You are only secure physically and materially as long as this country is secure. If for any reason this country is made insecure, you are the first to lose your security.
Over to South Sudan now, where a senior United Nations official says more peacekeepers will be deployed to Western Nile State. This is to facilitate a smooth return of people displaced by the just-ended civil war there. About 40 peacekeepers have been based in the Kodok outpost in the state for the past 7 months. The region was previously inaccessible by peacekeepers due to poor infrastructure. According to the UN representative in South Sudan, David Shearer, the scale up of peacekeepers is aimed at giving displaced families the confidence to return home.
It also means that humanitarian agencies are more likely to come back. And in Kodok here and for Shoda generally, there's a real need for improved health, improved education facilities.
The security situation is good, improving, and of course the presence of the UN and especially the forces is a stabilizing thing for the people, because when they see some forces around as neutral, so people feel that there's security. Apart from the security which we give them as a government, others may not be with us. So having a third party is a good thing.
Chinese peacekeeping engineers stationed in South Sudan have started repairing a damaged main road in the northern part of the country. It's designed to facilitate the United Nations mission to transport supplies and humanitarian aid to communities in need. The road links several main cities in the north. Heavy vehicles, erosion, as well as a lack of maintenance have delayed the repair work. The rehabilitation project has been assigned to the 9th Chinese peacekeeping contingent in Wau.
This supply line is about 704 kilometers long. The road has been severely damaged and it is challenging to repair it. We've deployed manpower at Wau, Rumbek and Kwajok. We started the repair work simultaneously. Firstly, we will open challenging sections, making them possible for vehicles to move on it. Then, we will gradually improve the road. Hopefully, the reconstruction of the main supply road will improve the local infrastructure and help the local people.
Chinese HMEC have worked very professional since the beginning from their deployment in Wau, and also they are helping to improve living conditions for the locals with these works.
Time for us to take a short break now. Here's what's coming up in the programme. The latest from the standoff between Russia and Ukraine. And HIV patients in Uganda urged to stick to their medication to keep the virus at bay.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
To the tensions between Russia and Ukraine now. The Kremlin is denying claims that it's blockading 2 Ukrainian ports. A spokesperson said shipping in the Kerch Strait, where the alleged initial incident took place, has carried on as usual.
I am not aware that any restrictions exist. On the contrary, we know that the Kerch Strait is normal. As you know, sometimes due to weather conditions, the Port of Kerch Authority makes decisions over navigating there.
The Kremlin spokesperson also commented on the Ukrainian president's request to NATO to send ships to the Sea of Azov. He said the request is aimed at causing tension and continuing provocations. Meanwhile, Russia has deployed a new battalion of advanced S-400 surface-to-air missile systems in northern Crimea. Meanwhile, several EU member countries have called for more sanctions on Russia after the flare-up of tensions with Ukraine. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said sanctions imposed on Russia are not for sanctions' sake, but to stand up for international law.
A lot of industry representatives obviously want good relations with Russia, and they're talking about the sanctions. But ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about something very basic. We don't impose sanctions on Russia for sanctions' sake. Rather, we impose sanctions to make clear that countries, even if their territorial situation puts them close to Russia, have the right to their own development. Those are the principles of international.
Merkel expressed her hope for Russia and Ukraine to solve the dispute through dialogue and reasonable approaches, as there's no military solution, she said, to the conflict. Earlier, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko asked for NATO naval support in the standoff. Merkel also blamed Russia for the tensions, adding that she would address the Sea of Azov issue with President Putin at the upcoming G20 summit.
I will raise the issue with the Russian president at the G20 meeting. We will ensure, and we have been asked by the Ukrainian side to be wise, because we know that we can only solve things in a reasonable way and through discussions, since there's no military solutions to all of these disputes. That must be made clear.
The upcoming elections in the Democratic Republic of Congo have sparked renewed interest in governance among young people. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa caught up with a university student in Kinshasa who wants the next president to transform the country by leading with integrity.
Gabriel Musafiri is a communication student at the Institute of Information and Communication Sciences in Kinshasa. He's been following the latest political developments keenly. The DRC is set to go to the polls on the 23rd of December to elect a new president. Gabriel is hoping the new leader will form a government that will prioritize the interests of the Congolese people.
I would like to see a responsible government that will cater for the interest of all Congolese and serve with integrity.
Young people make up the vast majority of the DRC's population. The United Nations estimates that 70% of all Congolese are youths. But many struggle to find jobs after completing their studies due to high unemployment rates.
People have lost hope in having a better life because things are very bad.
The polls are widely seen as an opportunity to spark a revival in the DRC. Gabriel is looking forward to voting in the forthcoming elections. He wants to see a new leadership that will end armed conflicts in the east and improve the lives of Congolese citizens. 18 candidates are running for the presidency, but it's likely to be a three-horse race between the opposition's Martin Fayulu and Felix Tshisekedi and the ruling coalition's Emmanuel Ramazani Shadari. The new president will face a huge challenge transforming a country battered by years of insecurity, as well as economic and political turmoil.
The government ought to be preoccupied with finding solutions to the numerous problems that ordinary Congolese face daily.
Gabriel and other students here hope these elections will provide better prospects for their future. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, let's remain in the Democratic Republic of Congo and examine the power of the spoken word. Poetry slams are competitive events where performers are rated by the audience. They were developed in Chicago in the mid-1980s, and since then they've spread globally. One young artist in the DRC uses the art form to raise awareness on topical issues in the country.
Congolese artist Yekima uses spoken word poetry to express himself. He raises awareness on issues ranging from politics to the socio-economic developments affecting his country.
With my style, Afro Slam, I am witness to what happens within society. I write what I see happening in the society, whether good or bad.
Yekima believes his poetry has an important message for his country, not to idolize men in power.
The Congolese love easy music, music which speaks directly. If it speaks of love, everyone understands love. But when it's music that requires a lot of understanding, I would say only 5% of Congolese are interested in slam music.
In spite of this, the young artist has managed to build a sizable following, mainly through social media.
Yekima is a slam artist who asks questions by exploring different themes and who leaves you to make your own conclusion about an issue. I think Yekima is an influencer, a person who pushes you to reflect on your country's policies and form your own critiques and decisions.
Yekima's most famous slam is known as the Zaire Years. It takes a look at the Central African nation during the rule of former Congolese leader Mobutu Sese Seko.
People have told me that my song is a eulogy to Mobutu, that it praises the former president, Mobutu Sese Seko. But I say that one can be detached when remembering and talking about those years back, when the country was Zaire.
J'évoque le Djalelo qui, jusqu'à ce jour, existe encore.
He says it's important for current regimes to remember the past and avoid a repetition of mistakes in the future.
Et là, 2, 3.
Yakima first started experimenting with poetry slams in 2008. He has also incorporated the art into a local choir where he began his career. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Uganda's HIV activists have started a campaign to encourage people living with the virus to take their medication regularly and on time. They say it could make a huge difference to their quality of life. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga caught up with one of the activists at her outreach mission.
Mastula Nakisozi is on her daily rounds, visiting people living with HIV. She says drug adherence or taking medication regularly and on time is still a major challenge in Uganda.
These people would go to the health centers and pick their drugs, that is ARVs, but nobody was able to go to their homes and follow them up and see how they were taking them. It was through our home visits that these people were found putting their drugs under the mattresses and they were not taking them well. Are you sleeping?
Sarah Namielo was bedridden for 4 months due to intermittent treatment. But since receiving counseling on the importance of adhering to her drug regimen, she feels much better.
Masitula encouraged me to take my medication every morning and every evening. She taught me about the importance of hygiene and also sensitized my family so they would not discriminate against me.
Namialo makes sure she takes her medication on time. She says she can feel the difference it makes to her health. As of now, she's able to do her daily chores without any interruption. Uganda's health ministry is promoting the 90-90-90 strategy to fight the epidemic. It aims to diagnose 90% of all people living with HIV, provide antiretrovirals to 90% of patients, and achieve viral suppression for 90% of those treated, all by 2020.
We want to make sure that we test them, bring them into treatment, keep them in treatment, and subsequently suppress their viral load.
The new strategy is already yielding positive results. Rose Yahweh has been living with the virus for 8 years.
After counseling, I started taking my medication, then I went for checkup in the hospital. They told me the virus has been suppressed. I am now happy.
Uganda's HIV prevalence rate stands at 6%. It's hoped that through the efforts of activists like Mastura Nakisozi, those living with HIV have long, healthy futures ahead of them. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala.
In Senegal, the country's culture minister, Abdou Coulibaly, is calling on France to return all Senegalese artwork. This follows a report urging France to return African art treasures in its possession. The report was commissioned by President Emmanuel Macron. This could include tens of thousands of work taken during France's colonial rule of Senegal. Coulibaly called for a full restitution while speaking at Senegal's Museum of Black Civilization.
If they have decided to return these works permanently, we will find ways to recover them. If they have decided on another form of restitution, deposit or loan, we are ready to find solutions with France. We know we have works there, but I don't know the number. But if we have 10,000, we would like to have the 10,000. Mais si nous en avons 10 000, nous souhaiterons avoir les 10 000.
A recap of your top stories now. Chinese President Xi Jinping has wrapped up his visit to Spain. He's now heading to Argentina for the G20 summit. He'll hold talks with other world leaders on Friday and Saturday before meeting with various Argentinian officials. Before leaving Spain, President Xi met with Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez on Wednesday. The two leaders presided over the signing of 18 bilateral and business agreements. The Kremlin is denying claims that it's blockading two Ukrainian ports. A spokesperson said shipping in the Kerch Strait, where the alleged initial incident took place, has carried on as usual. Meanwhile, several EU member countries have called for more sanctions on Russia after a flare-up of tensions with Ukraine. In Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari has visited the key northeastern city of Maiduguri in the wake of a recent setback in the fight against militants. He's urged troops to show more commitment in the fight against Boko Haram. The visit came a day before Buhari headed to the Chadian capital, N'Djamena, for talks with his regional counterparts on how to curb the insurgency in the Lake Chad Basin. And in South Sudan, a senior United Nations official says more peacekeepers will be deployed to Western Nile State. This is to facilitate a smooth return of people displaced by the just-ended civil war. About 40 peacekeepers have been based in the Kodok outpost in the state for the past 7 months. And those are the top stories that we're covering. Well, let's now go to Uche for all the latest business news. Over to you.
Thank you, Karen. And coming up on Africa Live Biz, Tanzania's central bank suspends 5 lenders for breaching forex regulations. And the U.S. Fed Reserve Chair hints at a likely end to interest rate hikes.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor, to the shout of the trader in a bustling free market. It's colorful, vibrant, and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Well, let's start off in Tanzania, where the central bank has suspended 5 lenders from conducting trade in the interbank foreign exchange market, and that's for a period of 1 month. Now, operations at Barclays, Exim, UBA, Bank ABC, and Azania have been frozen as they allegedly breached regulations and violated the market's code of conduct. Now, the deferment comes after regulators conducted surprise inspections of foreign exchange bureaus in the northern city of Arusha. More than 40 commercial banks operate in the East African nation. And moving on with just 2 words, U.S. Fed Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell has sent stocks surging by raising hopes that the central bank might be closer to ending its push to drive up interest rates. Now, Powell's comments marked a sharp change from his position last month. U.S. President Donald Trump, however, has criticized Powell lately, saying rate hikes is a hit back at the White House's tax cuts and other expansionary moves. In response, American stocks jumped and the U.S. dollar weakened, as well as emerging market currencies climbing.
Interest rates are still low by historical standards, and they remain just below the range of estimates of that level that would be neutral for the economy, that is, neither speeding up nor slowing down growth. We know that moving too fast would risk shortening the expansion. We also know that moving too slowly, keeping interest rates too low for too long, could risk other distortions in the form of higher inflation or destabilizing financial imbalances. Our path of gradual increases has been designed to balance these two risks, both of which we must take seriously.
And adding to North Africa now, Tunisia has secured a $500 million soft loan from Saudi Arabia. The move is part of deals announced after a visit by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Now, the interest rate of the loan is yet to be disclosed. Of course, Tunisia has been struggling to cut its budget deficit as well as stabilize falling foreign currency reserves and manage international lenders' expectations. The economy has been in turmoil since 2011, with citizens complaining about high unemployment levels, poverty and record inflation. Under pressure from the International Monetary Fund, Prime Minister Youssef Chahed has aimed to cut the budget deficit to about 4.9% of GDP this year from about 6.2% last year. Now, more than 100 countries have pledged their commitment to advancing the development of the sea and its resources while also protecting its ecosystems. We explored some of the innovative ways some of these nations are achieving this vision. Ira Ambani is one of Kenya's few eco-friendly fish leather producers. She uses skin discarded after processing fish to create these high-end handbags and shoes.
It's not a common product in Africa, but it's a product that has been done all over the world. The Eskimos have been doing it for many, many years, but it's a new product in Kenya. We take our fish from Turkana. We're actually a fish processing company. And so from the factory, we generate a lot of waste. So over the years, we thought, okay, it's a beautiful skin, so what can we do with it? So we decided to start turning it into leather.
Ira is here at the world's first Sustainable Blue Economy Conference to showcase innovative and sustainable ways to exploit sea resources. It may come as a surprise that 80% of fish waste produced every year is dumped. Well, Ira has turned that waste into a viable export industry. Employing at least 20 women, her handmade fish leather products are now popular in Europe.
Nile perch grows to a very big, to about 6 feet, and it can weigh 120 kilos. So this was a fish that weighed 30 kilos. And for this piece of skin, it would cost you 8,000 shillings. And every fish would have two sides. So from one fish, you'd get about 6,000 from a 30-kilo fish.
Innovative new industries such as fish leather is just one of the ways delegates here say we can expand and capture the potential of the blue economy. But a hot topic here has also been inclusivity. And many here say that women are at the heart of this. Now, the focus has been on pushing initiatives that support their work, expanding their roles in the maritime sector, as well as increasing their numbers in sectors such as shipping and fishing. An organization called Women in Maritime in Africa does just that. With over 100 members across 18 countries and counting, the organization works hand in hand with the African Union to promote gender equality in the maritime sector.
We support the women in aquaculture, the women in the fisheries department through cooperations. We identify with the women in the fishery in different cooperations, or we encourage them to establish cooperatives so that we can support them. We have bought fish ovens for some of these women to enable them bake their fishes so that they can preserve them for export. We also bought fishing nets and boats.
But all eyes at this inaugural conference have been on the island nation of Seychelles. The country has gone beyond business as usual, employing new ways of thinking and innovative financing tools that have protected its oceans while generating economic wealth. The country recently won international acclaim, becoming the first to issue a blue bond, raising about $15 million to finance investments in its blue economy.
What we've done with tourism specifically, the government realized that the way forward is for sustainable tourism, sustainable development. So we've developed a label called Seychelles Sustainable Tourism Label, and that label was developed in particular upon the recommendation of the government so that we ensure that all the tourism establishments, tourism activities are done in a sustainable way, and there are certain criteria they need to meet, and if they meet this criteria, then then they get that label, and that label shows that they are employing sustainable practices.
Its model is one that can be replicated across many of the world's small islands and coastal countries, as the blue economy movement gains traction across Africa. Uche Okoronkwo, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya. Now, in today's world, balancing career and family has resulted in delays in having children, and that often makes it difficult for couples trying to conceive, while newly established businesses are seeking to meet that need using technology. Well, here's CGTN's Mark New reporting.
What's the English name? Camera.
For China-born Du Han, having her second child took nearly 5 years. She named her son Comper, the same name she later gave her company, which came out with a smart basal thermometer and app that tracks the best time to conceive. A neurosurgeon by training, Du faced another challenge when starting her company, convincing male engineers to join her.
They want to do something really cool, like something like, something flying, something diving into the water. For example, they think that's sexy, right? So in the beginning, we had a lot of communication. You will feel proud that if you, make some product that your wife can use, your mom can use, they will, feel very thankful and, make some products really can, change people's life.
Comper's basal thermometer became one of the most popular items in its category in online stores in China. The company also listened to customers' needs and created new products to satisfy them, like a fetal heart monitor and their latest device, a thermometer that measures a child's temperature by being applied to the forehead. Du founded Comper here in Silicon Valley, but later moved its headquarters to Beijing to access a greater pool of engineering talent, manufacturing capabilities, and to better target China's markets. But still, Comper decided to launch its forehead thermometer on U.S. crowdfunding site Kickstarter. Why use crowdfunding in the U.S.?
It's a test for U.S. market, for product, to see if American users like it or not. They are giving us a lot of feedback to improve our product.
And why won't that work in China?
We have not found any platform like Kickstarter.
Americans like to purchase things earlier, is that one thing?
Yeah. Americans like purchase earlier, and they feel very comfortable to pay first and get probably the product months after or even 1 year.
Focusing on pregnancy is also proving to be a winning formula for the startup Mira.
So Mira is just like shrinking that kind of lab equipment into a palm-sized device.
Having won numerous pitch contests, Mira has just launched this fertility tracking device, which measures actual hormone concentrations.
She will just pee on this end or sample her urine by dipping into there. She will insert this test wand into our Mira analyzer. The data will be synchronized to our Mira app. Well, this will show, what is her fertile day, and most importantly, it will have her hormone curve. And also, it will tell her this is her fertile time.
Headquartered in Northern California, Mira also has its own production facility in Hangzhou, China. Their aim is to target both the U.S. and China markets, firmly believing their technology will impact lives around the world. Mark New, CGTN, Pleasanton, California.
Well, let's go to Egypt now, where young filmmaker Mohamed Hefsi is being credited for the success of this year's Cairo International Film Festival. After years of poor management, international stars have steered clear of the event. But with some fresh eyes at the helm, Hefsi has made this year's festival more vibrant and appealing to younger film goers. Now, our correspondent Adel El Maroui sat down with Hefsi to find out the secret to his success.
Quite satisfied with this current edition. We had a lot of ambition, and we tried to change a lot. I feel like this was a first step towards creating real sustainable improvement. This year was only the first but most important step because it was the most difficult. There's a great industry component that was added to the festival this year. They're some of the most important films of the year and the front runners for the awards campaigns. And we're screening those films as Middle East premiere, and many times with the company of directors, stars on the red carpet.
How do you think, or how do you evaluate in the festival in terms of content, the films, the international films being premiered here, and the participation of stars?
If you look at films like Green Book, the opening film, or Roma, or Private War, or some of the films in competition and out of competition, this is a tremendous improvement on last year. If you look at also you know, the complete lineup, you'll find 35 films that were among the most prominent award winners from previous festivals. And you'll find more than 10 or 12 films that represent their countries for the Academy Best Foreign Film category. In terms of programming, it's one of the healthiest and most improved elements of the festival. I wish we had more stars presenting their films, and more directors of a high caliber coming to the festival to discuss their work, to engage with the audience. But you know, this is something that I feel will improve next year.
Do you think that the Ghana Film Festival might have been the incentive to make people look for younger management, for some way to make the biggest and oldest festival in Egypt looks different and more attractive?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Guna was one of the reasons that, you know, opened eyes, that you know, that said to people, listen, we have to support Cairo Film Festival, because it's the festival with the biggest history, the biggest pedigree, and is a really internationally recognized festival, although it is seen as something that has kind of lost its tracks throughout the last maybe 7 or 10 years. So it was really time to get behind it, to support it.
After your experience with Cairo International Film Festival in its 40th edition as president, are you interested to continue in that position for the coming years?
I think it's important that that there be consistency and a longer mandate, you know, because it takes time to make real change.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up on Global Business Africa, the World Bank projects a less than 2% economic growth for Nigeria. We'll, of course, be examining the reasons behind that report. All that, of course, coming up top of the hour. For now, it's back to you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Uche. Well, we are going to a short break now. We've got all the sport coming up, including Cameroon and Mali face off for the third and final ticket from Africa to the Women's World Cup.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.
We start in Ghana, where Cameroon are set to take on Mali in the third place playoff of the ongoing tournament in Ghana on Friday. Both teams will know that a third spot at the 2019 FIFA Women's World Cup will be at stake for the winner of the match at Cape Coast. Both finalists, South Africa and Nigeria, have already sealed their ticket to the tournament next year in France. Qualification would mean a second appearance for Cameroon at the global tournament after they first qualified in 2015. They'll have their work cut out for them against Mali, who beat Ghana and Algeria in the group stages. Arsenal head coach Unai Emery says the change of venue for their Europa League match against Vorska Portava does not affect his team, but creates logistical inconvenience for fans. UEFA decided to move the Group E clash from the Olewski Butovsky Stadium to the National Sports Complex Olimpijski in Kiev due to security concerns following the introduction of martial law in Ukraine. Arsenal have already qualified for the knockout stages of the competition with 2 games to spare. This after securing 3 wins and a draw in their 4 matches so far.
The most important change is for the supporter, because they need to do the effort to come here and to stay with us tomorrow, and for us it's very important. Then it's doing cold here in Poltava, and we are going to play with this weather. But for us, is prepare one match in the with our players, with the context, and also with the respect for Europe League and for them, for Borska.
I'll say that it did not matter for us where to play. I think it is probably a disadvantage for Vorskla Poltava because they wanted to play at home, but it happened that we will play in Kiev.
The delayed second leg of the Copa Libertadores final between River Plate and Boca Juniors could be played in Qatar, according to a source from the South American Football Confederation, CONMEBOL. The Confederation is expected to make an official announcement later on Thursday at their headquarters in Paraguay, with December the 8th the most likely date for the tie. The organization's independent disciplinary tribunal is also due to hear Boca's appeal this Thursday to award them the game because of violence by River fans, throwing the future of the match into further confusion. Argentina's two biggest teams drew the first leg 2-2 at Boca's ground on November the 11th and were due to play the decisive second match at River's Monumental Stadium last Saturday before violence marred the clash. IOC President Thomas Bach supported Sheikh Ahmed and thanked him for voluntarily stepping aside for the good of the Olympic movement on Thursday. Speaking on the second day of meetings at the ANOC General Assembly, Tokyo 2018, Bach supported Sheikh Ahmed's decision and said it is a good example of good governance. Sheikh Ahmed Al-Fahad Al-Sabah, known as the Olympic Kingmaker, had stepped down temporarily early in the week as the president of ANOC over a corruption case.
After yesterday's discussion, I would once more pay respect to Sheikh Ahmed Al-Sabah and the firm stance he took after this discussion and the example there he has been setting for taking this responsibility to protect all of us. And we hope that we can see him back here very soon after his case is solved, and we will pay this respect then also on his hopeful return among all of you and among all of us.
In athletics news, the head of the Russian National Anti-Doping Agency, Yuri Ganus, declared a visit by a World Anti-Doping Agency delegation to its Moscow headquarters as a step forward. The delegation is trying to obtain computer data from the laboratory at the center of an extensive cover-up of Russian doping cases, which could lead to further bans for the country's top athletes. It's the latest step in a process which both agencies hope will culminate in Russian athletes being able to compete on the international stage without suspicion. Russia must provide computer data from the lab before the 31st of December or risk having its National Anti-Doping Agency suspended again 2 months after reinstatement.
Но главный вопрос заключается в том, что если бы
The main question is if the laboratory isn't open, God forbid, or access to checking the samples isn't granted, then according to the WADA International Standards Codex, Article 11, Provision B, Russia will face destructive consequences. In this scenario, our athletes will lose the right to compete on the international level.
Boxer Tyson Fury ripped his shirt off during a scuffle at the final press conference ahead of his fight with Deontay Wilder on Wednesday. The two fighters and their camps scuffled as the obligatory pose-off for photographers went off the rails. The pair were separated before any punches were thrown. The boxing world will be focused on Los Angeles this Saturday when the pair of unbeaten giants square off at the Staples Center. WBC title holder Deontay Wilder possesses a powerful right hand which will go against the boxing style of lineal champion Tyson Fury in one of the biggest fights the heavyweight division has seen in many years.
I'm only 3 days away from doing the same to the Bronze Bomber. So, I stand here today as the lineal heavyweight champion of the world. And on Saturday night, I'll become the WBC heavyweight champion of the world also.
This is a moment that I've been waiting for my entire career. This is the time It's my time. Fury had his time. When he beat Klitschko, that was his ultimate time. That was his window to do whatever he had to do. How he took upon his responsibilities as a champion, how he took upon his responsibility as his opportunity to do what he had to do, then that was up to him. But we can't fall here. We can't blame him for having a little fun in his life. Hey, he deserved it. But now, it's my time.
Well, that's it for this edition of Africa Live. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. Thank you for watching and see you again soon. Bye for now.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, emerging market stocks gained some ground today as we saw dovish remarks from the US Fed putting the dollar on the back foot. MSCI's emerging market index rose about 0.7% on the day, hitting a 3-week high. On the continent, South Africa's JSE pushing higher in broad-based gains, but we did see market heavyweight Naspers bucking the trend, falling about 1.1% on the day. In Nigeria, Dangote Cement was a drag on the market, falling almost 3% today. Of course, GT Bank and First Bank also topping the losers list. Now, also coming up on the show today, the World Bank projects less than 2% economic growth for Nigeria. In East Africa, Tanzania's central bank suspends 5 lenders for breaching forex regulations. And leaders of the world need to grow slightly less than 2% this year. The growth is largely or will be largely driven by the non-oil industry and services sector as the forthcoming elections keeps foreign 0.83% last year after shrinking by 1.58% in 2016, which of course was its first annual contraction in 25 years. Now for this year, Nigeria's central bank is projecting growth of 1.75%. The World Bank says growth in the farm sector, which has been resilient in the past, has slowed to 1.2% under the impact of security challenges in the northern part of the country. Well, let's discuss this further with Muda Yusuf. He is the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. You're very welcome to the show, sir. Now, the World Bank report does suggest that key policy reforms in Nigeria will be important in terms of supporting Nigeria's macroeconomic resilience going forward. But we do know that politics and campaigns will likely take the front seat ahead of those 2019 elections. So, Mr. Yusuf, how will this affect the fragile economic recovery going forward?
Well, definitely it will affect the economic recovery of the economy going forward. Because right now, the economy is very sensitive to development in the oil market. We are already beginning to see a decline in crude oil price to around $60 per barrel. There are challenges with the non-oil sector of the economy because of productivity issues, because of the weak infrastructure, and because of also the security issues. And we also have challenges with revenue. Revenue shortfall has become pronounced in recent months. Targets have not been met in terms of revenue. So all these challenges call for immediate reforms. But given the political environment at the moment, it is a very difficult political decision to make. We need reforms, for instance, in the oil and gas sector. The amount of resources, the amount of money spent on subsidy is so huge that is creating a major fiscal challenge for the government. But at this time, it is difficult for the government to tinker with the issue of fuel subsidy. It's also difficult for the central bank to adjust the exchange rate appropriately also for political reasons. So the political situation has made it very difficult for any major reforms to take place between now and the next 2 or 3 months.
Well, as you mentioned, sir, revenue collection is not doing very well right now. It actually came in at around 52% below targets in the first 3 quarters of the year. As you mentioned, largely the shortfall comes due to oil revenues in the country. High debt servicing costs also a major concern right now. So where does the budget implementation stand at this point?
Well, there is no specific numbers yet from the budget office. But clearly, there has been a major challenge with budget implementation, especially the capital component of the budget. In the last review, we learned that there has been substantial implementation with regard to the recurrent component of the budget, which is the personnel budget and the overhead. But in terms of the capital component of the budget, the performance has not been too good because of these revenue challenges. And one of the major areas in which we have the major revenue challenge is first, just as you said, the oil price, which recently had gone down. Secondly, we have the issue with what we call the independent revenue. That's revenue from government agencies that are revenue generating. Again, because of some political reasons, it has not been possible to get some of these revenue generating agencies to remit to government what actually should be remitted. And again, because the economy is also slowing down, the capacity of the private sector, the capacity of the investors to also pay taxes is also affected, because you can only pay tax on the profit that you make. Right. And if the economy is not doing well, there's a limit to how much tax revenue that the government can collect. Right. So these are the issues affecting the revenue and invariably affecting the implementation of the budget, especially the capital component of the budget.
Now, one thing the World Bank also noted was that foreign investments in the country is currently stagnant. And it's important to note that we also saw HSBC, a major bank, pulling out of Nigeria. GE also withdrew from a rail concession. So what's the outlook for foreign investment in the country, factoring in pre-election jitters?
Well, the outlook for foreign investment, for foreign direct investment, the outlook may still remain okay, because most of the foreign direct investments are not liquid investments. They are not investments that can move out of the economy so quickly. But for portfolio investors, yes, we have noticed some movement out of the economy. We have seen some capital flow reversals arising from portfolio investments. And this has been caused largely by the fears or the risk or the uncertainty about the elections that is coming. And of course, we have some global dimension to the issue, which has to do with the situation with interest rates in the United States and some other parts of the world, which has made it more profitable to take investments out of Nigeria. So the global dimension of the financial markets and the challenges of election had impacted largely on foreign portfolio investments. But now that oil price is also now plummeting, that could further exacerbate or escalate the exit of foreign capital from the economy, especially the portfolio investment, because already the drop in oil price is beginning to create some anxiety among investors, and that may trigger a lot of speculative pressure on the foreign exchange market. So those are the challenges for now as far as foreign investment is concerned. Yeah.
Well, on that note then, what is your outlook for the economy? We certainly expect a spike in inflation as well as election spend, as we see election spending rising next year. How does this impact your outlook for inflation and as the currency as well, the Naira? How does this impact your outlook for those factors?
I think the major issue as far as inflation is concerned, I will have to do more with the situation with the foreign exchange market. If the oil price continues to drop the way it is, it will definitely affect the exchange rate. And once there is a depreciation in exchange rates, there will be a major spike in inflation. Election spending, there is no empirical evidence to relate election spending to inflation, because the election process is a process that spans over 2 years or more. Already before now, the government and the INEC election officials have been spending quite a lot of money preparing logistics. The politicians have been spending money on their primaries and so on long before now. So the election spending sometimes, in my view, the factor seems to be overstated. We don't have empirical evidence to relate election spending to inflation. But clearly, challenge of supplies arising from food inflation, for instance, the challenges of food security, the challenges of shortfall in food production resulting from security problems in the northeast and in the middle belt of the country. That could be a major factor in food inflation, and that could affect inflation. Then if oil price continues to drop, it could also affect the exchange rate, which could also push up inflation. And if revenue also continues to drop, it could lead to increase in fiscal deficit, which could also lead to a spike in inflation. So these are the factors that poses a major threat to inflation at this time.
Quite right. Well, many thanks for your insights, Mr. Yusuf. Of course, Muda Yusuf, Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, joining us there in Lagos. Well, let's move on now. A new regional economic outlook report by the International Monetary Fund shows that sub-Saharan Africa is set to register modest growth in 2018, but it won't be enough to create enough jobs. Now, in countries like Uganda, job seekers fight for the few employment opportunities that are available, or they make the most of what they have in order to survive. Well, CGTN's Michael Baleke examines this further.
A daily struggle to make a living. Sharon Babazi has to make more than 1,000 bricks a day to survive. The sole breadwinner in her family, she says the money she earns is barely enough to get by.
I wanted to join university, but I had no money and my siblings were still studying. So instead of me quitting school, I decided to start this idea of laying bricks so that I can raise money.
Babazi is just one example of what many unemployed Ugandans go through to put food on the table. The International Monetary Fund is concerned that the current wave of technological advances will cut more jobs if countries like Uganda don't adjust their policies.
We need to continue investing in social sectors and in education, and that the education system has to be flexible. So it has to be flexible to be able to adapt and bring on board the skills that the new fourth industrial revolution might bring.
The IMF's latest regional economic outlook indicates that sub-Saharan Africa needs to create more than 20 million jobs a year to absorb its growing workforce over the next 2 decades. Uganda is investing heavily in transport and energy infrastructure to drive the economy. It's hoped it will lead to a recovery in the manufacturing, construction and service sectors to create the much needed jobs. But economists argue that infrastructure projects are capital intensive and funded by borrowed money, which may not deliver the economic development and transformation Uganda needs.
Those projects are necessary, but let's structure them in such a way that there's a very heavy local Ugandan content, because that is being done elsewhere and it can actually translate into jobs that are very highly desired in our economy.
However, the IMF says the process the country is making in mobilizing domestic revenue will ensure debt sustainability, and the recent good weather is likely to improve harvests, which will in turn reduce food prices and boost exports. But for many like Mbabazi, who can't afford land for subsistence farming, these bricks are all she has to earn a living. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, let's head to North Africa now. Egypt's central bank is ending a mechanism that guarantees that foreign investors seeking to sell out of Egyptian securities can access dollars. Now, the move, effective from December 4th, is aimed at loosening the country's grip on investment flows. Egypt has put the mechanism in place in March 2013 to ensure foreign investors would have access to foreign currency when they chose to withdraw from local securities. But analysts are saying its continued use had distorted the market. The central bank said in a statement that the decision covers any fresh foreign currency portfolio investments wishing to enter the local currency Egyptian T-bills, T-bonds market and stocks listed on the Egyptian Stock Exchange. Well, let's get more details on this from Yasser Hakim. He joins us now in Cairo. Yasser, welcome to the show. Now, give us a sense of what impact we'll see this move having on Egypt's interbank market, and how much of an impact it will have on banks' balance sheets.
Yes, Uche, the banks, the interbank market obviously will flourish because of the stagnation it has seen in the last couple of years. Obviously, this is linked to the amount of inflow that will be coming from outside the country in order to help the interbank market to spread out and increase. There has been a stagnation even before 2016, and this was why it's been seen as the right moment to start to use the interbank again. It will also be a good for the banks here. It will keep the fiscal part strong. It will keep the foreign reserve strong, and will also help the government in controlling the currency market here. Since 2016, when the inflation happened, and obviously devaluation of the Egyptian pound, more than $111 billion have entered the country, and this shows that the other way, the facilities given to the investors to get in their market or exit has brought good results. But at the moment, the government needs to control the exit and import of the markets, especially that the foreign reserves have increased from $12 billion to $44 billion, which makes it safe enough to put the interbank back into action and to control the investments and money inflow and outflow from the country.
Now, as we mentioned, Yasser, the move will take effect at the close of business on December 4th. So how are you expecting to see foreign investors react to this news?
First of all, it will not affect the foreign investors that are already here, that already have a portfolio and have been using the former transfer of funds and facilities given to the government. This will only affect the newcomers, the new investors who will be entering the market. So the current investors will not be affected, and therefore they feel safe enough, or they feel they will not be affected by it, or any instability or disorder in their operation, their daily operations and transfer of money. Now, concerning whether it will affect the foreign inflow, the government feels that it will not. The interbank system is something that goes around the world, and it is trying to do so here to try to control the market, especially the stock market that has been affected by the foreign investors in the last few months, and how they are trying to exit the market suddenly with huge numbers of money and selling off. And therefore, the government sees that it will be fair enough for both sides, for the government and for the investors, to retain the interbank at the moment.
Well, banks are certainly happy with this move. They are saying it's a positive step. But how are the local market players responding?
I think the other major player in the market is the stock exchange. Obviously, it has seen the inflow of foreign investors, and then they would go into the market and invest and then sell off their shares, and this has had a positive impact on the stock market. Now they fear that this new system will somehow sort of prevent some investors from entering the market easily, because they know they will have to go to exit according to the interbank system. But at the same time, it will prevent the stock exchange from falling into what's called the hot deals and hot money, that is only about foreign investors going in for one day, buying and then selling with huge numbers, exiting with huge numbers, and this would distort the market. And I think this is what the main impact will be at another player other than banks. The stock market will feel it will be more stable at the moment, though it hopes that the inflow of foreign investors would continue in the next few months.
Well, as always, many thanks, Yasser, for your insights. Yasser Hakim joining us there in Cairo. Let's move on now. Geka Mines, the Democratic Republic of Congo's state-owned miner, has launched a blistering attack against international mining companies. It said charges of corruption against the company are hypocrisy. Now, Albert Yuma, chairman of Geka Mines, says that foreign mining companies had caused the DRC, one of the poorest countries in the world, to lose billions of dollars in expected revenue over the past decade. According to Yuma, the country has lost about $4.9 billion in revenues between 2002 and 2016, when of course compared with initial projections which were promised by feasibility studies.
Nous allons, dès la fin de cette conférence,
We will initiate legal proceedings against these NGOs, and we will do so whenever they continue to damage our image and that of our country. Yes, these NGOs are enemies of the Democratic Republic of Congo and should be considered as such. Their only objective is the destabilization of the DRC.
et la déstabilisation de la République démocratique du Congo.
Well, let's shift focus to our corporate headlines for the day. South Africa's platinum miner Lonmin has reported a pre-tax profit of $68 million compared to a $1.17 billion loss the previous year. Now, the miner has pulled every lever it can to improve cash flows and stability to prepare for a takeover by Sibanye-Stillwater early in 2019. Lonmin has laid off about 8,000 employees as it put high-cost mines on care and maintenance and will continue to cut jobs as it shuts more unprofitable mines. Meanwhile, Uber driver partners, Uber Eats delivery partners and riders in Kenya will have more peace of mind when using Uber. The ride-hailing firm has announced the rollout of injury protection provided by UAP Old Mutual. This announcement forms part of Uber's global commitment across the Middle East and Africa region and is a unique first-of-its-kind solution for drivers and riders using tech apps across Kenya. Meanwhile, Family Bank, a leading bank in Kenya, has partnered with London-based financial tech firm SimbaPay to launch an instant money transfer service from Kenya to China through WeChat. The service will help boost Kenya-China trade. Over 7 million customers and businesses in Kenya will now access SimbaPay's international money transfer service to send money to China's WeChat Pay from Family Bank's Pesapap mobile banking app, and of course USSD service as well. And the Central Organization of Trade Unions in Kenya will move to an international court to take to task tea multinationals for violating workers' rights. Now, KOTU's Secretary General Francis Atwoli claims the companies have for 5 years now refused to implement collective bargaining agreements with over 300,000 members of the Kenya Plantation and Agricultural Workers Union. Now, the union has already signed an agreement with UK law firm Ozone Solicitors to assist in handling the case in Britain, where the firms are based. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Let's add into a short break now, still coming up on the show. Prosecutors raid Germany's biggest bank in money laundering investigation. And in East Africa, Tanzania's central bank suspends 5 lenders for breaching forex regulations.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidoo. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back. Now, Germany's largest financial institution, Deutsche Bank, has denied having knowingly kept additional information on the Panama Papers from authorities. Around 170 police officers, prosecutors and tax inspectors searched about 6 Deutsche Bank offices in and around Frankfurt over money laundering allegations. Now, investigators are looking into the activities of 2 Deutsche Bank staff members who are alleged to have helped a client set up offshore firms to launder money. The investigation was triggered after investigators revealed the so-called offshore leaks and Panama Papers.
We were under
the impression that we had already made all relevant information on the Panama Papers available to authorities. We will of course cooperate closely with the Frankfurt Prosecutor's Office because we too have an interest in clearing up the accusations quickly. We have repeatedly shown in previous years that we cooperate closely with the authorities and that we are ready to do so. We will continue to do so. Once we get new information, we will promptly inform you.
Meanwhile, in Tanzania, the central bank has suspended 5 lenders from conducting trade in the interbank foreign exchange market for a period of 1 month. Now, operations at Barclays, Exim, UBA, Bank ABC and Azania have been frozen as they allegedly breached regulations and violated the market's code of conduct. The deferment comes after regulators conducted surprise inspections of foreign exchange bureaus in the northern city of Arusha. Now, more than 40 commercial banks operate in the East African nation. And moving to North Africa now, Tunisia has secured a $500 million soft loan from Saudi Arabia. It's part of deals announced after a visit by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The interest rate of the loan is yet to be disclosed. Of course, Tunisia has been struggling to cut its budget deficit, stabilize its falling foreign currency reserves, and manage international lenders' expectations. The economy has been in turmoil since 2011, with citizens complaining about high unemployment levels, poverty, and record inflation. Under pressure from the International Monetary Fund, Prime Minister Youssef Chahed has aimed to cut the budget deficit to about 4.9% of GDP this year from about 6.2% last year. Meanwhile, in Egypt, the country recently signed an agreement with a Hungarian-Russian coalition to revamp its railway fleet. Now, as part of the deal, staff at Egypt's Semaf railway equipment factory will receive skills and training to manufacture about 1,300 state-of-the-art coaches. Semaf is the only factory in the Middle East and North Africa that supplies regional railway networks. Here's CGTN's Adel Al-Maroui with more on the story.
It's the biggest deal in the history of Egypt's Railroad Authority. Valued at $1.2 billion, it will introduce 1,300 new coaches to the aging railway network. As part of the deal, state-owned company Semaf will receive the technology to produce these advanced trains in Egypt.
The
1,300 coach deal comes with a loan. The lenders will dictate the percentage of the domestic manufacturing component. The law states it shouldn't be less than 40%. This deal will greatly enhance our capabilities. Until now, Egypt hasn't had the technology to manufacture stainless steel trains.
Most of Semaf coaches are made of iron and used for standard cargo and passenger services. But under the Russian-Hungarian agreement, the factory will be able to manufacture coaches from start to finish right here in Egypt.
To import trains is expensive and doesn't make use of the available local manpower. About 100 industries support locomotive manufacturing. When these coaches are produced at Semaf, we will cut costs by at least 50%.
For more sophisticated machinery, such as that used for underground railway lines, the percentage of locally manufactured components drops to about 25%. Adopting modern technology and enhancing the factory's capabilities have become crucial for Semaf's survival in the global market.
The future of Semaf can't depend solely on Egypt's needs. As an organization, we don't depend on the state for funding. This is why we need to expand our exports and form new partnerships with international companies. General Electric has a contract to supply 100 locomotives to Egypt. After evaluating CEMAF's infrastructure, it's decided to manufacture half of them here, which is a first.
With the additional expertise gained from the General Electric deal, Egypt is planning to manufacture locomotives for the African and Arab markets. CEMAF has its eyes on 2 more deals, a high-speed train that will connect the Red Sea with the Mediterranean and an intra-city monorail in the capital, Cairo. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Now, Ethiopia has overtaken Dubai as a conduit for long-haul passengers to Africa. This, of course, highlights the success of the state airline's expansion drive. The number of transfers from Bole International Airport in Addis Ababa has increased by about 85% in 5 years. Here's CGTN's Girum Chala with more.
Addis Ababa Airport is now the busiest airport when compared to Dubai. Travel consultancy Forward Key says in its latest analysis, long-haul passenger traffic at Bole International Airport has increased by 18% compared to only 3% in Dubai. The number of transfers to sub-Saharan Africa through Addis Ababa has increased by 85% in the past 5 years. In Dubai, traditionally known as the busiest link, the transfers stood at 31% during the same period. Given the lack of an open skies deal smoothing flights across Africa, many passengers traveling between one part of the continent and another, or from Asia or Europe, must often transit through Dubai. The new status has been linked to Ethiopian Airlines' aggressive expansion strategy. The state-owned carrier is accelerating a 15-year strategy to win back market share on routes to and from Africa that are dominated by Turkish Airlines and Emirates. Forward Keys also attributes the recent jump in bookings via Addis Ababa to a positive international response to the broad reforms introduced by Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. And in a related development, Ethiopian Airlines has been named African-based airliner for the 7th time in a row. The award has been given in recognition of ET's remarkable financial performance. The award was presented at the 50th African Airline Association Annual General Assembly in Rabat, Morocco. Ethiopian is the country's most successful state-owned company and only profitable national airline in Africa. Grumjara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Now, after years of work, direct flights from the United States into Kenya's capital, Nairobi, formally started in late October this year. Kenya Airways, one of the continent's top 3 carriers by fleet size, now offers a direct link to Eastern Africa, bypassing hubs in Europe and the Middle East. Now, as CGTN's Ramanyang reports, this is a major bet for a carrier that's yet to even break even.
From final approval for direct flights on the 13th of September by the TSA to the first direct flight taking off on the 28th of October, it really didn't take long for Kenya Airways to start daily flights to JFK. Now, to get to East Africa in the past, any of the near 300,000 American tourists who traveled to Kenya in 2017 had to come in through a hub in Europe or the Middle East in a trip that often took well over a day. That's now been cut to just about 15 hours. Only the carrier's 7 Boeing 787 Dreamliners have the range and the capacity to handle traffic on this transatlantic route. But for this route to succeed, the carrier still has to resolve a number of issues. Barely a fortnight after the start of these direct non-stop flights, the carrier cut the frequency of flights until the first week of December, citing low demand. Price may also be a concern for some. An economy class return ticket on Kenya Airways can set you back anywhere between $1,200 to $1,600. That's comparable, remember, to competitors like Emirates, even though they have to take a much longer route. The carrier is also struggling to retain staff. The 2017 fiscal year saw the biggest exit of pilots in any one year. 55 of them leaving for the carriers, leaving it 2% short of its needed complement at a time when it was adding more routes, continuing a decline that started in 2015. Kenya Airways also last posted an annual profit in 2012, and it has been bleeding money ever since. Losses peaked at over $260 million in 2016, and then they fell to about $77 or so million the following year. Revenues in the first half of 2018 are just about $520 million, not sufficient for the firm to post an operating profit. Fuel prices are also concerned. They pushed up operating costs by nearly 14%, and without a hedging policy in place, this carrier is fully exposed to wild swings in oil prices. It is no surprise, therefore, that investors are quite literally voting with their wallets. Take a look at this chart here. Kenya Airways share price has fallen by over 40% so far in 2018, with sell recommendations pretty much right across the board from February to date. Clarity on how well this massive bet on direct US flights has worked out for one of Africa's top 3 carriers will emerge next in its set of results. Ramanyang, CGTN, Nairobi.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's head into a short break now. Still to come. Leaders of the world's most powerful and emerging economies gather in Buenos Aires for the crucial G20 summit. And Bank of England Governor Mark Carney calls for a transition deal ahead of the Brexit vote.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's recap today's headlines now. Chinese President Xi Jinping has wrapped up his visit to Spain. He is now heading to Argentina for the G20 summit. He will hold talks with other world leaders on Friday and Saturday before meeting with various Argentinian officials. Now, before leaving Spain, President Xi met with Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez on Wednesday. The two leaders presided over the signing of 18 bilateral and business agreements. Meanwhile, the Kremlin is denying claims that it's blockading 2 Ukrainian ports. A spokesperson has said that shipping in the Kerch Strait, where the alleged initial incident took place, has carried on as usual. Meanwhile, several EU member countries have called for more sanctions on Russia after the flare-up of tensions with Ukraine. And in Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari has visited the key northeastern city of Maiduguri in the wake of a recent setback in the fight against militants. Now he's urging troops to show more commitment in the fight against Boko Haram. The visit came a day before Buhari headed to the Chadian capital, N'Djamena, for talks with his regional counterparts on how to curb the insurgency in the Lake Chad Basin. Now in South Sudan, a senior United Nations official says more peacekeepers will be deployed to the Western Nile state. This, of course, is to facilitate a smooth return of people displaced by the just-ended civil war. About 40 peacekeepers have been based in the Kodok outpost in the state for the past 7 months. And that's a recap of today's headlines. Now, global leaders will be gathering in the Argentine capital for a G20 summit, likely to be dominated by simmering international tensions over trade. The G20 summit will mark U.S. President Donald Trump's first substantive talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin since a July summit in Helsinki, where, of course, we saw the U.S. leader's deferential tone draw stern rebukes back at home. Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to meet Trump, seeking to break an impasse in their trade war on the sidelines of the summit. President Xi has cast himself as a defender of globalization and an opponent of protectionism. But U.S. and European governments say foreign companies still face many hurdles to conduct business in China. Well, residents in crisis-hit Argentina, however, had a lukewarm reception to hosting the summit.
The G20 is a waste of money, a waste of time for us, because we're going to be isolated. We won't even be able to go out because of the tight security. We won't be able to talk on the phone because there won't be any network. That's what people say. I don't really know.
I live 2 blocks away and I had to walk like 8 more blocks to be allowed to go through. This is the price you have to pay to open up to the world. I don't want Venezuela, I don't want Cuba, I want a democratic country.
No quiero Cuba. Now, of course, trade tensions between the United States and China are expected to weigh heavily on the G20 gathering. Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to discuss the tariffs with President Donald Trump. CGTN's Stephen Gibbs reports from Buenos Aires.
For President Xi, here meeting the King of Spain en route to Argentina, the G20 will be no routine gathering. It will be here in Buenos Aires that the future direction of the most important trading relationship in the world will be discussed over dinner. This G20 will be the first time the leaders of China and the United States have met since the last summit in Germany in 2017. The precise location of their bilateral has not yet been revealed, but it's understood to be a restaurant somewhere in the Argentine capital. On the agenda will be the future of US tariffs on Chinese goods. There is time pressure for a settlement. On January the 1st, the US, which accuses China of intellectual property violations and unfair trading practices, is due to increase tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods from 10% to 25%. Already, the US has imposed punitive taxes on Chinese-made steel and aluminium. China is making it clear it does want a deal.
See, we in China, we certainly don't want to have any trade war with anybody else, certainly not the United States. And we want to have a negotiated solution to the current issues. But the key to this solution is a balanced approach to concerns of both sides.
In Washington, meanwhile, the US National Security Advisor John Bolton said that the beginnings of an agreement are possible.
Obviously, both leaders carry into any discussion like this their national interest, and I think it's instructive, and I think the Chinese side believes the same thing, to have the two leaders exchange their views in the presence of their senior advisors, and not with the expectation that at this meeting there'll be some substantial agreement coming out of it, but that there would be an indication, a kind of way ahead that the advisors could then pursue.
China doesn't want the trade issue to totally dominate the main summit. There are other things to discuss, including reform of the World Trade Organization and climate change. But inevitably, the main focus will be on that crucial dinner meeting between the two presidents. Stephen Gibbs, CGTN, Buenos Aires.
Well, let's get the latest on the summit. We're joined now by Joel Richards in Buenos Aires. Very welcome to the show, Joel. Now, of course, we just heard that the meeting between Trump and Putin has been cancelled, but there's still a lot more that we're watching out for at this year's summit, including that meeting between President Trump and China's Xi on tariffs. Now, today, we heard a working dinner for finance ministers was on the agenda. Give us an update on that meeting and certainly your expectations for the summit.
Yeah, of course. We're in Argentina now, just one day ahead of the G20 summit beginning. And as you said rightly, tonight there is a working dinner for the finance ministers, who really have been perhaps one of the most important tracks in the G20 that has been meeting over the course of recent months. And it's attracted a lot of headlines, of course, because of this issue, because of the tension over trade and the tariffs war between the United States and China. So while many people are waiting to see what comes of the meeting between President Xi and President Trump, this evening, before the presidents meet, the finance ministers do meet. And as we said, we've seen the tone of these meetings really change. Early on in the year, there was real tension amongst the finance ministers, but I was able to interview the chief Sherpa for Argentina, the chief delegate for the G20, who said how they've managed to make agreements, have a dialogue amongst the finance minister and reach some kinds of consensus over the type of language. Of course, all of this depends on what happens between the United States and China over tariffs, but the hope is certainly that there are a number of suggestions from the finance ministers that working really to look at guidelines over international trade and economic development.
Quite right, Joel. Now, as usual, Anti-G20 protests and meetings are expected usually at these meetings. A People's Summit, we heard, kicked off on Wednesday. What came out of that gathering?
That's right, this was a summit, they called it the Counter Summit if you like, and it really brought together a number of activists, academics, social organisations and social movements and students who wanted to discuss many of the issues that they feel obviously very strongly about. And what's interesting is there is a point of agreement, but with the G20, which is the kind of issues which they need to talk about, which is gender perspective and increasing women's equality in the world economy, climate change, of course, very high up on their priorities, the future of work, employment, a number of issues which the G20 is discussing. What the issue is that they have a very different conclusion and diagnosis of the problem and what could be the solutions to these problems. They say that the G20 simply offers a financial solution put forward by large corporations. They want much more dialogue which brings together many more of the proposals that civil society, academics, social organisations and so on, some of their proposals they'd like to be listened to much more closely by the G20.
Now, there's of course been a lot of talk around Argentina's preparation for this G20 summit. We hear they've shut down the main business districts as well as local businesses, and they're not too happy about that. Give us an update on the country's preparation.
That's right, this is the largest event ever to be held in Argentina, and Buenos Aires is a city that has essentially been shut down. It is the business areas and some of the key areas where leaders will be over the course of the next few days, but essentially Buenos Aires is shutting down. This is a city of 3 million people. That population at least doubles, if not more, every single working day, with people from the outskirts of the city coming to work in the city. Now, this is a country where economic activity is falling, and so, as you rightly say, many local businesses are seeing that this simply does not favour them. In terms of the security operation, as we said, it's the largest operation ever held in Argentina. Well over 20,000 security officers are deployed around the city, trying to ensure that there are no problems. We saw there were incidents, of course, last year in Hamburg at the G20 in Germany. They're hoping and they've called for peaceful demonstrations here in Argentina. There will be a large march tomorrow with social movements here in Argentina, called for 3 p.m. local time. So there will be a large protest, and of course everyone hoping that it is peaceful, but certainly the security preparations are in place, and Argentina really taking no risks whatsoever when it comes to trying to ensure there are no problems here.
Well, we'll certainly be watching. Many thanks, Joel, for that update. Joel Richards joining us there in Buenos Aires. Well, let's move on now. The Bank of England Governor Mark Carney said on Thursday it was in Britain's best interest to strike a transition deal with the European Union, regardless of whatever form Brexit takes. Now, Carney made the statement a day after the central bank published a range of Brexit scenarios, which it said banks could have to deal with. Here's CGTN's Andy Bruce with the details.
Hours after the government issued its own stark warning about a no-deal Brexit, the BOE said the economy could shrink by as much as 8% in about a year. The two reports could pressure lawmakers to drop their opposition to the Brexit agreement that Prime Minister Theresa May struck with other EU leaders on Sunday, which is far from certain to be approved in Parliament on December the 11th. However, supporters of a more definitive break with Brussels quickly dismissed the reports as scaremongering, while advocates of closer ties said the forecast demonstrated that promises of greater prosperity outside the EU had been aligned. The BOE said the disorderly scenario involving severe delays at UK borders and financial markets' loss of confidence in British institutions was not its base case. But if it happened, there would be a 25% tumble in the value of sterling, taking it close to parity against the dollar, a spike in inflation to 6.5% from around 2.4% now, and a jump in interest rates. House prices would fall by 30%.
Evidence from surveys and other UK authorities suggests that the country is not yet fully prepared for a cliff-edge Brexit. Surveys suggest that less than half of businesses have initiated contingency plans for no deal, and less than a fifth of small businesses have done so.
Britain will be economically worse off in any scenario outside the EU, the government said Wednesday, as the Bank of England warned that a no-deal Brexit could trigger a financial crisis. The government's plans for post-Brexit ties with the European Union would still cost the economy around 3.9% of gross domestic product over 15 years, according to a government report. Song Yaotian, CGTN.
Well, let's shift focus now. Here's a look at how commodities performed today. Gold prices firmed up as we saw the dollar faltering. Of course, that's following dovish comments from the U.S. Fed Chair Jerome Powell, which, of course, calmed investors' concerns over the pace of rate hikes. Meanwhile, oil prices ticking higher on optimism that trade talks at the G20 meeting could aid the global economy as well as improve the demand outlook. But an increase in U.S. crude inventories to their highest in a year curbed gains today. Let's head into a short break now, still to come. We'll get some insight into Africa's fashion industry from Morocco's pioneer designer, Al-Fadi Sagnali.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Now, FEMA is Africa's largest fashion festival dedicated to the young upcoming designers as well as models from the continent. The event was launched 20 years ago and is held every 2 years in Niger. For the first time, the fashion festival was held in Morocco to celebrate its 20th anniversary. Well, Yasser Hakim spoke with the founder and president of FEMA, Al-Fadi Sagnali, a fashion designer himself. He began the discussion by highlighting the role FEMA plays in promoting African fashion.
FEMA is like 20 years we talk about how we can help Africa, how we can give human face for the fashion African designer, how we can help African, and how we can use our name, our brand to take part of this big industry in the world. And now the person beginning to understand us, and we need partnership. We need partner for musician, partner from financial things, and partner for communication. That is a way supposed to be beginning now.
What do African talented designers and models need to be successful on the international stage?
Financial person, partnerships, to make it together. We can make the production in Africa. We can help African to do it together with a big producer, Chinese maybe, producer, Americans, maybe Africans also have money. They can put this money in African designer. That's very important. African, maybe they have money, but African person, African milliardaire, no one to put money to help African design. That's bad. African, no one to help Africa. But now we want really to give them chance that African, we're supposed to do it. Cooperation, South-South is very important. You have money, I have my label. Together we can make money. That is the thing we're supposed to do. We need today to make African cosmetic, African perfume, African shoes, to do it in Africa and to use African label for that. And Africa need that to protect Africa.
What makes African fashion unique around the world?
Because we are unique. Our material are unique. Our embroideries, our pearls, our materials, that's ancestral pearls and ancestral work we have it. And we can use next 100 years again, and we can because we have one continent. The colors, the material, the embroideries, the mentality things, and we protect that. That's true, but we can inspire for the modernity, for make modern African fashion.
As an experienced fashion designer, what's your intake about the Chinese fashion industry?
I was in China 50 years ago. I was a jury for the UNESCO big concours for the designer from China, Japan. I was there, and they come, and it's very important. And they see incredible designer from China. They're interesting, they are lovely, they are very kind, they are very extravaganza like designer. And we need them. We're supposed to be together. And I think really China is a big city, plenty person population. They can wear African colors. They love colors too.
Now, before we go, let's check in on Africa's currencies today. Nigeria's naira weakened by 1% on the black market to about 370 naira per dollar. This, of course, is quite significant because it's its weakest level since August 2017. Now, traders say some black market outlets are hoarding dollars, fearing a recent sharp fall in oil prices could lead to a shortage of the U.S. currency. Meanwhile, South Africa's rand headed for its best November in 3 decades. It firmed up, extending overnight gains following dovish comments, of course, from U.S. Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and of course the rest of the team,